Hello guys, welcome back to Epic History Facts channel. Today let's step into the twilight of World War II, where the ink of surrender had barely dried and yet the echoes of gunfire still danced across Europe. In hidden corners, amidst forests and mountains, soldiers fought on in defiance, unaware or unwilling to accept that their cause had crumbled. These are the stories of the final skirmishes, secret missions, and unyielding spirits that marked the chaotic end of a global conflict, painting a mosaic of resilience and tragedy in the war's last desperate days. Here are top 10 crazy facts about the last battles in Europe. Number 10. Continuing the fight. In the waning days of World War II, some Waffen-SS units refused to acknowledge the end of the conflict. Fanatical in their beliefs, these units continued to fight against Soviet and Allied forces, engaging in skirmishes well into late May 1945. These die-hard soldiers, driven by a twisted sense of loyalty and honor, defied orders to surrender, believing that capitulation was a betrayal of their cause. The persistence of these units illustrates the depth of indoctrination and the extent to which ideology can drive individuals to continue fighting long after the larger conflict has been resolved. These final battles, fought in defiance of reality, are a stark reminder of the lingering shadows of war. Number 9. Prisoner of war, POW, confusion. As the war ended, the vast network of German POW camps became scenes of chaos and confusion. Many guards abandoned their posts, fleeing from advancing Allied forces, leaving prisoners to their own devices. In some camps, POWs took control, organizing themselves and maintaining order amidst the uncertainty. This period of self-governance within the camps underscored the resilience and adaptability of the prisoners, who, even in captivity, managed to assert a measure of autonomy. The confusion in the POW camps during the final days of the war highlights the breakdown of structure and authority that accompanied the collapse of the Third Reich. Number 8. The Alpine Fortress myth. As the war in Europe drew to a close, rumors of an Alpine Fortress, where Nazi diehards would make a last stand, created a strategic distraction for the Allies. This mythical bastion in the Alps, purportedly stocked with weapons and fanatical troops, led the Allies to divert significant resources to counter this potential threat. In reality, the fortress was largely a fabrication, a psychological strategy that played on the fears and uncertainties of the time. The myth of the Alpine Fortress highlights the extent to which misinformation and psychological warfare influenced military strategies and decisions, even as the actual conflict was drawing to a close. Number 7. Isolated Japanese holdouts. Though the focus of May 1945 was on Europe's closing battles, it's crucial to remember the persistent shadows of conflict in the Pacific. Japanese soldiers, deeply ingrained with a code of honor and duty, continued to fight long after their country's surrender. The most famous of these holdouts, Hiroo Onoda, did not lay down his arms until 1974, believing the war was still ongoing. This tenacity, rooted in loyalty and isolation, mirrored the delayed communications that had also kept German troops fighting past the official end in Europe. The isolated persistence of these soldiers adds a layer of tragedy and dedication to the already complex narrative of World War II's conclusion. Number 6. Nazi resistance in Norway. High in the rugged terrain of Norway, German forces, under the command of General Franz Böhme, continued to resist the Allied forces' advances. Despite the formal surrender of Germany on May 8, 1945, these troops held out until the official German surrender in Norway on May 9th. The remote and inhospitable Norwegian landscape provided a fitting backdrop for this last gasp of resistance. Norwegian resistance fighters, who had waged a guerrilla war against the occupiers for years, joined forces with the advancing Allies to push the remaining German troops into surrender. This final act of defiance in Norway highlights the fragmented end of the war, where the cessation of hostilities was a process rather than a single event. Number 5. The Battle of Texel. On the small Dutch island of Texel, an extraordinary and brutal chapter of World War II played out in its final days. Georgian soldiers, forcibly conscripted into the German army, turned their weapons against their oppressors in a desperate bid for freedom. This rebellion, beginning in April 1945, extended beyond Germany's official surrender, with fierce fighting continuing until May 20th, 1945. The island became a battleground, its peaceful landscapes torn apart by this last stand of defiance. The Georgians, driven by a fierce desire for liberty, fought with a tenacity that underscored the deep-seated yearning for autonomy and dignity. The Battle of Texel stands as a testament to the complexities and enduring struggles within the broader tapestry of the war. Number 4. U-boat surrender. Beneath the waves of the Atlantic, the German U-boat U-234 navigated its mission with a cargo as mysterious as it was dangerous. On board were crates of uranium oxide intended for Japan, a last-ditch effort to share the Nazi nuclear ambition with their distant ally. As the war ended, the U-boat surrendered to American forces on May 14, 1945. The fate of the uranium and the full intentions behind its shipment remain shrouded in speculation and intrigue. This submarine, carrying the potential seeds of further destruction, was captured in the final days of the war, its mission aborted by the inexorable march of Allied victory. The story of U-234 adds a layer of mystery to the closing days of World War II, where not all secrets surfaced with the tide of surrender. Number 3. The Forgotten War. Far from the heart of the European conflict, the Channel Islands endured their own quiet siege. Occupied by German forces since 1940, these islands were a forgotten front in a war that had already moved on. It was not until May 25, 1945, that the isolated garrisons received word of Germany's surrender. Cut off from the main theaters of war, the soldiers stationed here had continued their routines, unaware that their country had capitulated weeks earlier. The local inhabitants, too, lived in a strange limbo, under the occupation of a force that had technically ceased to exist. The surrender of the Channel Islands was a poignant footnote in the closing chapter of the war, a reminder of the reach and persistence of conflict even in the most secluded places. Number 2. The Courland Pocket. In the remote corners of Latvia, the Courland Pocket became a stage for one of World War II's final acts of resistance. German forces entrenched there, surrounded by the relentless advance of the Soviet Red Army, fought on until May 23, 1945. These soldiers, trapped in a shrinking enclave, faced overwhelming odds with a fierce tenacity that belied the hopelessness of their situation. The dense forests and rugged terrain echoed with the sounds of battle, even as the rest of Europe began to take its first tentative steps towards rebuilding. The Soviet forces, relentless in their pursuit, paid a heavy price to break this final bastion of Nazi resistance. The stubborn defense of the Courland Pocket highlighted the fractured end of the war, where the news of surrender took time to penetrate, and where the will to fight lingered longer than the cause. Number 1. The final skirmishes. In the twilight of the war, even as the ink dried on Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945, the sounds of gunfire still echoed in Europe's hidden corners. Isolated German units, cut off from their chain of command and starved of communication, continued their futile resistance. The war, which had been declared over, stubbornly refused to recognize the official end in these pockets of defiance. Deep in the forests and mountains, soldiers who had not heard of the Führer's fall or who refused to believe it held their positions, unaware that their cause had already been buried under the rubble of Berlin. The landscape of Europe, scarred by years of relentless conflict, bore witness to these last, desperate acts of defiance. Even as the Allies moved to restore order and peace, these isolated skirmishes flared up, a tragic reminder of a war that did not surrender easily to peace. As we journey through the final echoes of World War II, we uncover the resilience, defiance, and lingering shadows of a conflict that refused to end neatly. From the remote skirmishes in hidden corners of Europe to the mysterious surrender of U-234, these stories reveal the complexity and humanity in the war's closing days. The indomitable spirit of those who continued to fight, unaware or unwilling to accept the end, paints a poignant picture of war's enduring impact. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of history's hidden facets. If you enjoyed these untold tales, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more epic stories from Epic History Facts.